We had planned this topic a few weeks back, and it's definitely timely. I feel like this week has been so heavy. We were having a conversation a little bit before we got started about just the weather. Like it very much feels like a dreary and heavy and a sad day. I feel like in Philadelphia for anyone who's not from Philly and is joining us. So earlier this week, actually, a Black millennial father, hey Dad, a Black millennial father, Walter Wallace Jr., was actually experiencing a mental health crisis and was killed by the police during this incident. So this has been weighing heavily on the city of Philadelphia. I feel like definitely me personally, and our panelists as well. So really want to be sensitive when we're having this conversation today. We want to make space to talk about this, but we also are looking to focus on solutions and opportunities around mental health as well. So just want to remind everyone that this wound is still fresh and we want to make space for that. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Chelsey Lowe. I'm the Impact Labs program manager at the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia, where I work on the Well City Challenge presented by Independence Blue Cross. So I'm gonna share my screen 1 second. All right, yep, so we're really excited to have you all join today. The Well City Challenge is a social impact challenge focused on community solutions to millennial health and mental health, and it's powered by the Economy League, presented by Independence Blue Cross, and we also have some additional support from the Philadelphia Foundation. So I want to show you all a quick video. Actually, I have to, stop sharing because I did forget the sound trick. We just mentioned it. Share computer sounds. There we go. Marquita, if you could just raise your hand if the sound is working.
Did you know millennials make up the largest share of the US population? Sure, they are known for being tech savvy, practicing mindfulness, and being socially and ethically conscious. But they are also on track to be in worse health than previous generations. Our community needs you. You have the power to help shape how we address millennial health and mental health challenges in our beloved city. Let's define what our communities need, spark inspiration and ideas, and unlock true, homegrown community solutions to millennial health through the Well City Challenge. From better access to fresh, healthy foods, to more ways to embrace mind and body activities, to finding ways to stay socially connected. Let's build it together and make a better tomorrow together. And City of Brotherly Love, let's show compassion for the alarming physical and mental health challenges that millennials are facing, like depression, anxiety, and hypertension, which increased during the challenging times of COVID-19 and social injustice. Help us cultivate ways to build a healthier community. Let's raise awareness, fuel radical collaborations, reimagine social connection, revitalize your nutrition while improving your mind and your body. We can tackle the health and mental health challenges of our largest generation. Let's create and innovate to make a better tomorrow together. Pitch your best ideas, Philly. We'll connect you with our mentors and get you ready for a pitch competition with our judges to possibly become a finalist in the food and nutrition, mind and body, or community and social connection categories. The best part? You could even win money to fund your idea. Visit economyleague.org/wellcity.
So that was a short overview of the challenge. So the challenge is really focused on community solutions. And when we say that, we mean people from the community that you don't have to be a health provider, you don't have to be an entrepreneur already, but you may have an idea around these topics. So we've broken down the challenge into 3 areas. So the first focus area is community and social connection. The second one is food and nutrition. And the third is mind and body. So think mindfulness and fitness. And the challenge currently, our call for ideas is open. So if someone has an idea that they're looking for, it could be a for-profit or nonprofit venture, they can currently apply for the challenge at the website, economyleague.org/wellcity. And the deadline for that is November 20th. And they're applying basically for this program where we're going to have an incubator with workshops that help them formulate and really develop their ideas. So it doesn't have to be something that's already in operation. We're really looking for things that are at the ideation stage and helping them support and get ready. So the top ideas will be selected to go into the incubator. And from there, we'll have a pitch competition that we're going to be doing virtually. So we're really excited to work with them on that. And for our pitch competition, we have over $50,000 in prizes across each of the categories in total. We have $50,000. And the winners from the challenge will move on to an impact accelerator where they'll pilot their ideas. So we'll have some additional mentorship and really help them develop and formulate their idea and get that ready. So testing that out in this climate. And the final stage is our funder roundtable or funder activation. So we have an additional $50,000 in seed investments that we'll give to the winners from our pitch competition. So the program's really broken down into 4 phases, but currently we're in our call for ideas phase where we're really looking for ideas relating to millennial health and mental health. So for more information on the application, we do have some requirements. Applicants need to be 21 or older, and that they also need to be located in southeastern Pennsylvania and have an idea that relates to millennial health or mental health. But for more information, definitely visit economyleague.org/wellcity. And I'm willing to take questions about the challenge anytime. You feel free to reach out to me. So want to have a chance to introduce our panelists now. So just gonna toss it over to you to do a quick introduction, just your name, your organization, and high level, a little bit more about what you do. So I want to start with Marquita.
So hi, my name is Marquita Bolden. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the executive director of the Therapy Center of Philadelphia, which is a nonprofit mental health organization located in Center City, Philadelphia. We serve women, transgender, and gender diverse community members. We provide both individual and group therapy and also marital and couples therapy. We've been around since 1972, and we use a social justice framework in all the work we do. Outside of TCP, I'm also a therapist in private practice, so I'm also actively practicing in the mental health field.
Great. Next, we'll go to Kate Fox.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Fox. My pronouns are she, her, hers, too. I work at the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. So we are a city organization at the City of Philadelphia responsible for administering the public behavioral health treatment services, prevention services, crisis services, inpatient, outpatient, all of the mental health treatment in the city. We do some homeless work too, and my role is the public health policy advisor. So I work to create policy, translate research into practice at the department. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And then finally, Sudan Green.
Hey everybody, I'm Sudan. I'm the founder of Spirits Up. We're a company that has been, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. From Philadelphia as well. But yeah, founded Spirits Up this past year. It was in reaction to the protests. We wanted to provide a safe space for the, first and foremost, Black and Indigenous people that were out there protesting and feeling the pain, but also just the allies. And we did that for 6 days in June. And then it became, a larger issue, and we started a company from it to continue to provide safe spaces for Black and Indigenous people to heal through the lens of meditation, mindfulness, yoga, as well as molding art, music, and writing into that newly. So yeah, that's what we do.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I definitely want to make space for you all to talk about how you're feeling and processing this week. I know it's kind of hitting everyone different and at different times. But I'm curious to know, with all the trauma that we're experiencing this week, how are you actually feeling? Like, how are you? Are you okay? You wanna, yeah,
Uh,
Sudan?
So
I'll start. Cool. So I guess you'll just start it off
Yeah, Sudan,
with
you
the
can go,
current.
and then Marquita.
Yeah. I'm definitely feeling a lot because personally, growing up in Philadelphia, it was something that relates to me and my family. I'll keep it 100% honest. One of my brothers I've dealt with, we don't know to this day if it's a mental instability, a mental issue. We don't know what he has because he is now, older and isn't willing to go to the doctor. And there's that, again, the stigma of mental health and it being something that is a sign of weakness. And that's been something in my family for a long time, something that we've been dealing with. So this situation and seeing the video, kind of by surprise, it was a textbook situation for me. Like it was something that was thrown in my face and next thing you know, I'm watching somebody murdered. But it was very, very close to my heart because I have been in that same situation in Germantown, Philadelphia, outside with a with my brother, with a knife in his hand, cops there. And it just didn't end up like this. So that's really all I can speak on that at the moment because it's deep. It's just really deep for me. And but everything that we're doing right now, being here, doing the work that I'm doing with Spirits Up, being here, listening to this conversation and contributing to this conversation, all falls in line with at least doing the work that is needed to be done to begin to help.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your honesty. Marquita?
yeah, it's been a really hard, painful week, and it feels like particularly this year, Black folks have been grieving, 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 and we really haven't had a break from that grief. And I've noticed for myself this week, a lot of trauma responses are coming up for me around yet another Black man murdered by police. Um, what I'm noticing is that I kind of move in between feeling sadness to hopelessness to anxiety to disconnection and numbness. And those are all trauma responses. And I just kind of ebb and flow throughout all those spaces. For my own mental health, I've decided to not watch the video because there is something incredibly detrimental about witnessing yet another Black human murdered on camera. So for me, I don't need to see it because it only increases my symptoms. And for my own mental health, I've decided to not watch it. But I'm grieving. I'm grieving along with everyone else, and I've been trying to be gentle with myself this week and really give myself a lot of grace around this is the appropriate response when people you care about and community members are murdered. This is the appropriate response when you are witness to police sanctioned violence. So just trying to be gentle and kind and just recognize that my body, my nervous system is very activated right now because of what's happened.
Thank you for articulating that numbness. I feel like I haven't had words for that, but you've provided that for me right now. I really appreciate that. And Kate, how are you doing?
Not well, honestly. I think I'm in like the anger stage of grief. I'm feeling really frustrated by just how repeated that this trauma is and that nothing changes. And it shouldn't have to happen in our city or in our neighborhoods for our systems, just in Philadelphia to make a change. It feels really disingenuous for city council or police or mental health systems to respond now after we lost a life. We've been talking about this for years, and I'm just very frustrated by the resistance to change, lack of change, and how hard it is to move a system and to be responsive to this. But I like Marquita said too, I'm trying to appreciate my anger response because we can't normalize this either. So I'm trying to appreciate all my emotions this week because you should be having those and it's not normal and it's not okay.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your honesty. I really appreciate that. I'm curious to know, how have you prioritized your health? I know, Marquita, you said in not watching the video, but are there any other ways you've prioritized your health, either this week or during the pandemic? Just looking for some ways to cope. What has worked for you? Sudan, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's super fresh. So, honestly, I want to, again, being completely honest, I feel even being in this space and dealing with Spirits Up, I'm very like young in this. And the reason this all started was because of a lot of the things that I would, one of the things being what I just shared with you all. So I'm still coping and trying to figure out the best ways to deal with stress. I live on 52nd Street around that area, so it's like right outside. I haven't really been able to, besides the things that kind of keep my body calm and keep my mind calm, like reading. And I read a lot about like the ancestors like that have already been here, and have already experienced this. And so I read a lot about where they're at, because I mean, specifically Asada Shakur and her situation. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that's my biggest piece of self-care in the sense of dealing with protests and in the sense of dealing with Black death and murder, is reading a lot about the history and knowing that it's not isolated in the now, but there's a history to it, and there's a plethora of knowledge to be able to. Hearing how they coped with it helps me cope with it, So right now, that's my start. I haven't gotten to a lot of other things because it's so fresh and so deep, but that's my start, is reading a lot of different voices that have already been here before.
Marquita or Kate, do you all have any other, I guess, tactics or advice?
Sure. And I appreciate Sudan just mentioning ancestry. And I think particularly for communities of color and more specifically Black folks, I think calling in, leaning into ancestors and allowing them to hold us during these hard times has been, I think, critical for our well-being and our emotional well-being and wellness. We come from a long line of incredible, just brilliance and joy, and it's helpful to ground myself in remembering that and remembering who I am. I think more broadly, there are so many things. I give myself permission to rage and scream and cry and just like be in my emotion. I also, just in regard to my own mental health, have also been reading, and I've been reading a specific book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resla Menachem, which is focused on healing racial trauma. And the book is incredible because it involves a lot of body work, which is needed right now because trauma is something that we hold in our bodies. It's not intellectual, it is embodied, it is emotional, it's like it lives in our nervous system. So having this book just to kind of go through my own practices around healing and grounding has been incredible. It's been hard work, but it's been important work. I also have been leaning into Black community a whole lot. So I've been reaching out to other Black therapists that I know and just processing with them. I have been like just digesting a lot of Black media, watching Black TV shows and being with Black music, and just really just kind of wrapping myself up in Blackness because it just feels healing for me to do that. And I think the other thing that I've been trying to give myself permission to connect back with joy, because for me, joy is an act of resistance. And it's a healing experience to be with joy and to give yourself permission. So I've been able to like figure out how to be playful with my kids. I'm watching TV shows that make me laugh. I'm spending time with friends by Zoom and connecting with people who see me and affirm me in a way that the larger world does not. Um, I also recommend journaling. And, to be really transparent, I'm also someone who consumes my own therapy. I think it's been incredibly important um, to make sure that I'm attending to my own mental health. And I think even us therapists need therapy too. So I think it's a collection of things between making space for my feelings and also doing things that are soothing and calming for my feelings, and also reaching for things that bring me joy and hope again.
I love all of those things. My go-to is definitely living single. During the whole pandemic, that's been the backdrop on my TV. But Kate, I'm curious to know what's working for you.
I guess my strategy is harm reduction strategy. So I have been turning to food a lot, which then I sometimes feel guilty about. But then it's, we all need to do something. So food is, a source of comfort, brings people together, even if you can't be together. Food has been very comforting to me during this whole pandemic. And I've been reflecting during the pandemic on what productivity means and why I feel more confident about myself the busier that I am, and that this time has forced me to slow down. And at the beginning, it was really a lot of guilt around that, about, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. But reflecting on, what does that say about the way I've been conditioned to think that being busy is being effective or productive, and what does that mean for my own mental health, and really just allowing myself to slow down and take a nap or watch TV or read, and you don't have to be going all the time.
Yes, I agree with that, especially the food part. It's been hard to be disciplined in the kitchen this whole year. But I did want to turn to the stigma around mental health. How there's still this stigma around talking about mental health, and thank you all for joining us today, because this is about the process of breaking down that stigma, especially for millennials, because that we're our future generations. But I guess, what have you seen in your practice or in your work in the stigma and how it affects the communities that you're working with? Could you talk more about like stigma and maybe how you've overcome it, or just how it shows up in the work you do? Marquita, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I'm finding that millennials are much more open and receptive to and are easily engaged in therapy. And like in comparison to older generations, millennials are just have more language around emotional and mental wellness. It feels like talking about our mental health has become a lot more normalized with millennials than the older generations. So, my experience in working with millennials is that they are absolutely coming to therapy. They're talking with their friends about therapy. Their relationship to therapy feels very different than their parents and their grandparents, for sure. Where older folks, it feels like it's more talking about therapy behind closed doors and in whispers, and that's not been my experience with millennials. When it comes to millennials who have marginalized identities, so I'm talking about queer millennials, Black, Brown, Indigenous millennials, the conversation around stigma feels a bit different. So I think there's a lot of discussion around what communities can do to overcome the barriers to be able to access care. But what I don't think is talked about as much is what's happening on the side of the profession, where it doesn't feel like a safe space for people to come and receive care. So, when I think about the mental health field, and this might feel provocative to say, but the mental health field is not more perfect than the large society, which is filled with racism and sexism and heterosexism and cissexism. All of those isms inform the mental health field. And for that reason, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, I think, have experienced significant harm historically when working with a therapist around some really intimate things. So, what feels good to me, what I feel really proud about, is that the field is, I think, moving in a more socially just way. There's a lot more discussion among therapists around being anti-racist. There's a lot more discussion among therapists around really like taking a look at heterosexism in therapy. And I think that is absolutely where we need to be and continue to have those ongoing discussions. But when I think when it comes to stigma, perhaps the better question is for the field to be talking a whole lot more and exploring a whole lot more. How safe is this space for people who are not white, who are not male, who are not upper middle class or wealthy, who are able-bodied? Like, we can go down like all of these identities of privilege. So I'm excited that the field is becoming more quote unquote woke. And I think that as a result, more Black, Brown, Indigenous people are open to therapy because they're receiving care that's affirming and appropriate. They're receiving care where they can be seen, where they can talk about the impact of systemic racism on their emotional health and well-being. And that's exactly what needs to happen because it is traumatizing to exist while Black in 2020. And these are the things that need to be talked about in therapy. So I think the field is starting to engage in the work it needs to be a more welcoming place to the people who need this support the most.
Thank you for that. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if you in the audience have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll collect those and distribute at the end. But Sudan, I wanted to open up, Kate, go ahead.
I wanted to agree with everything Marquita said. And also I kind of approach this from a systems level. I'm not a clinician or a therapist myself. I'm a public health person. Thinking about the progress that's been made in the mental health field, you know, everybody now is really into ending the opioid epidemic, and we can't talk about the opioid epidemic without acknowledging the racism that kind of underpins the attention on that in our country. And there are Black and Brown people who were very harmed by the crack cocaine epidemic in the 90s in our city, who just, you know, as the field of mental health is evolving, they feel left out of that because it didn't evolve when it was affecting their communities. So I just want to underpin Marquita's statement in understanding kind of history of the mental health field too, and that lens.
Thanks for that. Sudan, I wanted to take this stigma conversation and pivot it a little bit more for Spirits Up. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you make Spirits Up a welcoming environment to fight that stigma? Could you share a little bit more about your programming and how it's welcoming and inclusive?
Yeah. I think, well, one, you know, I'm happy to hear as a, you know, that the mental health field is opening up and becoming more inclusive. As someone who is, you know, newly being introduced to like therapy and going into therapy as a Black man. But, you know, Spirits Up, we work mainly, you know, we work through yoga. So far we've activated through yoga and meditation, like mainly, and making that available to Black and Indigenous communities, and also having Black and Indigenous instructors and, you know, giving these stories, hearing their voices. And as I don't know how many people here have, you know, been in meditation or yoga classes, but a lot of times it's always going to be like a super soothing, you know, kind of situation where somebody is trying to get you in a state of rest, right? How it all started was I felt rested, but after the fact, after yoga class, or meditation, I would feel very vulnerable. And then after feeling vulnerable, I would feel not attacked, but sort of just I like to put it as an image. If you kind of like think of when you have like these humans in the forest and there's like the little animal, it's kind of like you don't see anyone like you. You're very scared. And now they say like things are more afraid of you than they are of them, than you are of them. And that's kind of how I would consistently feel, because I would be going deep into these vulnerable states of self and self-awareness and mental awareness, and where I was in my headspace through yoga and through meditation. And I would be the only Black person in the room. And also then I started to realize that the person giving me the healing also wasn't Black. So then I began to like think about how am I actually being brought onto a deeper level past the surface if the person that I'm actually, communicating with on that teacher, or, in a sense, I look at that, my instructors sometimes, as a kind of therapy. How do I connect and go deeper with them if they can't really understand spiritually, energetically what I'm going through right now? Because a lot of my issues are very stereotypically Black, like I have dealt with gun violence, murder, a lot of those things. So in that, Spirits Up has been trying to, in a very basic way, just provide Black people with Black instructors and Black healing and other Black professionals giving out these offerings and these classes and these safe spaces. These people were already doing this before, Spirits Up came into play. We just connected a lot of the dots and tried to bring it all together, and was blessed enough by the energy of the summer to be able to provide. But, we just showed a lot of people what was already there, helped show what was already there and trying to and elevate that voice. So that's really, that's all we're doing. It seems it's already been safe spaces out here in Philly, Studio 34, 3 Queens Yoga Studio, Jade Javon, who does meditation all around the city. A lot of these people activate for free and help Black women, Black people, Black men, Black children all the time. It's just that the infrastructure isn't there to provide for them. So we're working to try to create that infrastructure and help to start that infrastructure, and be screaming that we need that infrastructure. And that's how we're, not in a sense creating the safe space, but amplifying the safe space, And well, I won't undercut it. We are creating a safe space as well. But it's really about amplifying it for us.
So we did get a question, and it relates to that of William asked, what is a safe space and what happens at the places? What's their purpose? So I guess, could you just, clarify a little bit?
I think that's a really deep question. I would also like to hear from Marquita and Kate on that, as well, as someone who is learning and creating safe spaces. But what I think is a safe space is, one, I think it should be molded every time before you go into, if you have that opportunity, be molded before you go into something. You're hearing the people, you're looking at your crowd and hearing them and listening to them and kind of checking in with everybody. And basically just as a facilitator, creating a safe space, you're there to help and assist everyone as best you can. And I think in yoga, what I see the instructors doing and creating their safe space is just being extremely Black, speaking to what is going on. If I'm in a yoga class in Center City, sometimes I'm not going to hear the fact that, there were a certain amount of murders over the weekend in West Philadelphia or Germantown, because they don't live in those neighborhoods, usually. And when we're being taught by Black instructors, we're able to hear and heal from these things. And it's not always a trauma. Sometimes it's just literally hearing a story about how someone woke up that morning. And a lot of times, that is that can be a very individually Black thing, and indigenous and person of color thing. So hearing these stories, I always see yoga as storytelling. So it's like creating a safe space by just being themselves and being unequivocally Black. Yeah, for me, that's what it is for me, because there's not enough of those safe spaces for Black people, and there's not enough Black teachers, Black instructors, Black people in positions of not power, but just influence that are amplified on a frequent basis.
Thank you. So just to touch base on, I want to learn a little bit more before this week happened. How was your work affected? How did you innovate or form any new partnerships as it related to the pandemic or the racial uprisings, mainly focusing on the ones that happened over the summer? Because I know we're still processing this week, but was there any changes or new work that you all were able to do earlier in the year? Kate, did you have something?
Sure. I'm very excited about the expansion to telehealth for mental health and addiction treatment. There were a lot of regulations and state rules and all these barriers to giving out telehealth in the mental health and addictions fields prior to COVID that all kind of got put on pause. And it's a really good opportunity. It's like almost like a testing vacuum where you have this special cases where these rules went away and now you have data and you can show this is working. We're accessing more people. People are engaging in treatment for longer. And so we're working now towards advocating for these barriers to just be lifted permanently, even when we're not in a pandemic. And it increases access to mental health supports and services. You can offer services at, not just 9 to 5, but if people are more therapists that we've surveyed are more willing to offer services in nighttime hours or early morning hours, which makes people who are working more able to access services too. And another thing that we're pushing for because of the pandemic is viewing internet access and telephone access as a social determinant. So thinking about that as something that we can really work to address as the healthcare field, right? Like healthcare is working towards about food insecurity and housing and transportation. And in these pandemic times where we also need to be thinking about the digital divide, thinking about ensuring access to internet services so that people can access either mental health or physical health services.
I love that. That thinking about the internet as part of your public health. If you can't access the internet, then you couldn't, get so many basic services now. Marquita or Sudan, did you have anything to add to that around how your business or your organizations really have pivoted during this year, during COVID, or earlier in the summer?
Sure, I can speak to that. So like Kate talked about, we moved to telehealth from providing all of our services in office. So it was a pretty significant shift for us because at the therapy center, part of our belief is that therapy is incredibly relational. It isn't just about a person coming in and just kind of opening up what they're holding, but it's about what it feels like to share a physical space with the person who is actively listening to you, and what it feels like to receive maybe physical touch during a time that you're feeling highly activated. It's about experiencing the therapy office and all of the intentional things that we place in that space that are meant to be soothing, affirming, and create a really intentional healing environment. So all of that got taken away once we shifted into telehealth 100%. So I personally have not seen any of my clients since March 16th, 2020, face-to-face. It's all been by video. And I feel like that is a whole other conversation, but this particular year has been not just about the impact of COVID and all of our deep concern about our physical and well-being, but it's also been about our emotional well-being. It's about calls for racial justice. It's about calls for economic justice. It's a calls for reproductive justice. There's a lot happening right now. So at the therapy center, we have a pretty long history of really engaging in work focused on anti-racism and, as I mentioned, a social justice lens. At the therapy center, I'm really proud to say that we have this internal committee that's called the Change Team. The Change Team is made up of all different members from different levels of the organization. So therapists, myself as executive director, 2 board members, our clinical director, and this group is a multiracial group, a diverse in race, and we come together each week specifically to talk about the organization's racial equity goals and how we're upholding them. The change team is responsible for ensuring that our staff is on a consistent basis engaging in their own personal work around uprooting white supremacy. And the change team has been instrumental in making sure that we're receiving outside trainings, and we've been working with other organizations around them creating their own change teams. But I think the most significant thing that happened that felt like a big shift for TCP is that we realized that, whoa, our therapists are in this too, that we are also experiencing all the trauma, all the uncertainty, all of the anxiety of what has happened in 2020. So we decided to really deepen our work around racial equity, and we have been having consistent space for our Black therapists to just process what it feels like to be a Black therapist in 2020, to really receive community support, to begin to heal racial trauma that they're experiencing, not only in their work with clients who are also holding that trauma, but just in their own lived experience. And the counterpart to that has been that our white therapists have also been engaging in their own racial equity work around really taking a deeper look at white privilege, around dismantling internalized white supremacy. So what felt right this particular year was to do this internal healing work in racial caucuses or racial affinity groups, as we call them, understanding that the needs of Black and brown folks are different than the needs of white folks. And there's a parallel process that needs to happen around the work so that we then can all come together and do some incredible healing work. But I think because the Black experience is so specific, and because, as Sudan said, safety is so scarce for Black folks, it's felt important that we lean into community internally to really be in that work in a really deeply personal way. So I think we've had to have a shift in how we're taking care of our Black therapists at TCP, because the other half of this is that we want to make sure that they have longevity in the field. We want to make sure that they're supported. We want to make sure that they're receiving all of the care and love and attention that they need to maintain themselves in this work. So we have our change team, we have our racial affinity groups that we're working within, and all of this informs how we work with our clients. So all of this trickles down into how we move in our therapeutic spaces. So I'm really proud of what we've done, and that it's getting attention from other organizations that hope to replicate a similar process.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. I love the model. I love your commitment to your team and really developing them. Before we go into Q&A, so start thinking about your questions. I did want Sudan to give you an opportunity to talk more about your festival that you have coming up, and if you could share more about that.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we started out of the protest, like I said, and this year has pretty much incubated us. And we've been working to create a festival for the past, since Spirits Up pretty much ended in the summer. We've been working to create a online festival and trying to figure out what that would look like. And we finally, got it all together, and we launched it yesterday, the schedule and all of that. So for 3 weekends, we're gonna have a festival in November starting on the 7th. And this festival is gonna be all online and molding yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and that practice with the practice of poetry, music, and writing and art as well. So it's really kind of like connecting those to what I see different types of storytelling and Black and Indigenous storytelling, and trying to give them to Philadelphia and as well the nation, since it's online and available to a lot of different people. As well, this week we also figured out it's kind of weird, the timing of it all. You know, we started Spirits Up during the protests, and it reverberated through Philly. And then really oddly, this whole time of of us creating it, my business partner Elias is on here as well, who works with Little Giant, and they work with us to create the offerings. But we were saying like, yo, we hope it doesn't get back to what it was like when we were creating this in the beginning, with helicopters, cops outside seeing everything. And then, you know, Monday this all happened, and it was really weird. It was extremely weird, in that and the divine timing of it all. But also it helped me not be too distraught, because I thought of it as a blessing that we had did all this work and are able to bring this offering to Philadelphia at this moment. So we also launched this like program to try to get 100+ free tickets for the whole month, for people in Philadelphia, and Black people and Indigenous people in particular and specifically, to have the offerings that we're giving. So we're launching that, and a lot of people have been responding and been willing to create this, you know, help get this fund up for Black people in Philadelphia. So that is our offering, and it's going to be, I'm excited because it's something that's becoming really amazing, and the timing of it all is necessary and it's meaningful, and you know, it's in line. And that's kind of how I'm not falling apart right now, because it shows that there's like a larger purpose to what I've been doing for the past 4 months. And even though, you know, another life was lost, there's still so many lives that we have to work to keep healthy and safe.
And one of, if people are interested in connecting with each of you,
Yeah.
what's the best way to reach? Sudan, we'll start with you, and then Kate and Marquita.
Yeah, so honestly, a lot of it's been on our Instagram, Spirits Up 215, and my Instagram as well is where you can find, I'm active there on a lot of the work. So Spirits Up 215, and then mine's is I'm Out Front. It's very simple, straight like that.
You put it in the chat for us.
Yeah, I can put it in the chat. And I'll put the website as well and everything, so you can find it right there. So yeah, keep an eye out for what we're doing over the next couple months or next month.
And Kate, what's the best way to reach you?
I'll put my email in the chat, and I'll just throw out there that if you, the Department of Behavioral Health has a lot of resources to offer. So if you ever want, you know, a training at your organization or for your community, we can arrange that. We can we also have a community response team that responds to neighborhood violence. So we, you know, anything that you need, if I'm not the right person, I can connect you to the right person within the department. So I'll put my email in the chat.
And Marquita, can you also put, I guess, like your best contact or the therapy center's best contact information?
Yep, I will put it in the chat.
Okay. And definitely wanted to remind you all again about the Well City Challenge. So if you have an idea or you know someone working in the space of millennial health or mental health, feel free to shoot them over, and I'll put that our website in the chat as well. But open to any questions. So does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Can either put it in the chat or you can unmute if you want. Okay, if no questions, I did have one additional question for the panelists. The Well City Challenge is all about, excuse me, new ideas around health. So I'm just curious to know, like in an ideal world, or if you had unlimited resources, how would you create more, how would you make mental health more accessible? Like what tool or what resource would you create?
Hi, well,
Oh, go ahead.
hi, I'm Christy Vo. I'm actually a psychiatrist and medical director of Telehealth at the Children's Hospital Philadelphia. And to me, I think we make it more accessible by making it easy for people to join support group, to book a session with therapists. And I think right now, even when you try to find a therapist, you go to their webpage, you get their email or their phone number, you play phone tag, email tag. It takes forever to find support. And so I think we need to make that easier for the user. We need to think about the millennial, the user experience. That's actually part of the reason why I apologize, but I have to do a plug for my website, orchid.exchange. It's a platform where users can find their level of support, whether that's peer support, whether that's group support, whether that is a therapist, whether that's a psychiatrist. So you can choose what fits you. And tonight, actually, at 8 p.m., we have a support group for Black women on this topic, on systemic racism and all the microaggression and et cetera, hosted by our Black therapist, Jenny De La Cruz. It's free. So with the code called Osato, O-S-A-T-O, he's a musician, a Black musician that is sponsoring this. So you guys check it out. I put the link on our group chat, and yeah, check out our platform. And that's a great place for you guys to find the support that you need. And most of it is free. We're partnering with the National Alliance of Mental Illness for a free support group as well.
Thank you.
I think that making mental health accessible through funding sources is what's needed. So there's a lot of just fear, I think, of how am I going to find a therapist? What if my insurance doesn't pay for it? My copay to see my therapist is $50 a session. And that, you know, if you're in the public system, we don't have any copays if you're on Medicaid. So it's, to me, accessing mental health services actually is more of an issue in the privately insured group. And then especially how do you change those structures, those payment structures? There's supposed to be parity, but I do not pay $50 when I go see my primary care physician I have to pay $50 when I go see my therapist. I don't know. And then I also think something that Sudan is doing is bringing people together. That's something that I think millennials really respond to, is that just connection. And I think we're a pretty social generation. So even if it's virtual, the offering, we at DBH IDS have a group called Next Gen. So it brings the young professionals together. And, you know, that is a form of mental health and wellness, to connect and to be forming a community. So another suggestion I would have for millennial health and wellness is to have more spaces like that, where, you know, young professionals or young people can just connect, can commiserate about similar challenges that they're facing. It doesn't need to, you know, get to a certain point to access, you know, true mental health treatment. It can really be about building community and providing those spaces that Sudan already is providing.
We did have a question, and ties back more to the digital divide conversation we were having. It says, can either of you talk a little more about the benefits and drawbacks of telehealth for marginalized people? So we know, you know, if someone isn't able to access, you know, what are the other solutions during this time? And we don't know how long this is gonna last. So anyone have any opinions on that?
Sure, I can speak about that. So telehealth has been both the blessing and the curse in my experience. I think some of the benefits, particularly for marginalized people, are that you're able to engage in care in your own space. So, you know, to be able to be in the safety and comfort of like your own home that you've created in a way that really speaks to your emotional wellness, I think has been incredibly important. I think that people have more flexibility in being able to schedule when we're talking about telehealth, because we're not worrying about commutes, not worrying about having to figure out car fare or bus fare. There's a way in which I think people who don't have access to larger resources are able to engage in telehealth in a way that wasn't possible when we're talking about having to commute to my office, move through security, like all the things that happen when you're engaging in that in-office care. On the other side, what I'm finding is that therapy and having privacy in therapy is critical. We cannot expect folks to really be with their feelings and be present in session if they don't have privacy. There's concern that their kid's going to come walking in the door. If there's not a room that they can kind of close the door and be in their work with their therapist. And I'm finding that particularly for marginalized people, finding privacy so that they can engage in like a 50-minute session has become more difficult. So what I'm noticing is that more of my clients of color are calling me from their cars or calling me from outside because there isn't space, like physical space for them to engage in the work with me from home. Internet connection is also a problem. So even for folks who do have access to internet, oftentimes in marginalized communities, the connection is not the best. So we get choppy connection, we get dropped calls. So these are issues of like larger inequity that I think need to be addressed, as Kate was talking about. I do think telehealth is here to stay. I do think it is something that the field has to do a lot more thinking about, because part of the hardship is that we all just kind of fell into telehealth on a more global basis, and we didn't really have the time or capacity to really be intentional around that transition. So I think these are the questions we need to start thinking about, like particularly what are the needs of marginalized people if we're going to stay in this telehealth space. That being said, I know therapists have gotten creative. They're meeting with people in parks, they're meeting with people in tucked away public spaces. We're doing phone calls to be able to engage in therapy. Like, we're getting creative. So I think where there's creativity, there's innovation, and we can meet people where they are. We just have to think outside the box. So I'm seeing a lot of people really stepping out of more traditional therapy roles and really thinking about, okay, how can I be with this person who really, really needs the support right now? And then does it have to be in this particular medium?
And I just want to throw out a statistic because I respond well to when I hear like data. Philadelphia, I think probably most people know that Philadelphia has a 26% of the population living below the federal poverty line. We also rank last among the 25 largest cities in the world for internet access. This is measured on like the American Community Survey. So we have like, I think only 60% of our population in Philly having broadband internet services in the home. And I'm sure that's been addressed since COVID. You know, I know the school district did a lot of work with internet access, but I just keeping that in mind for our city too. There's certainly a divide in our city.
Mind if I say something too?
Yes, of course.
I think those statistics are also really crazy to me because we also have some of the largest internet companies, their home is here. So they always say they cover, you know, but who do they cover, you know, actually? But going off of what Marquita is saying, creativity, you know, that's my standpoint 100%, because I'm not like the usual, in a sense, like a suspect for speaking on mental health always, but I like to really I'm beginning to own the fact that why I am here is because I have experienced a lot of what we speak on, you know, and I am privileged enough to have creative ways to work my way out of it and figure my way out of it. And now it's my turn or my chance, or I have the opportunity to now use that privilege to help, you know, those who look just like me but don't have that same privilege, or don't look just like me and don't have any privileges, you know. So I am trying to think of creative ways, and I think we need more of that, you know, more support for our Black men, Black women, the Black queer community. We just need more support and entrepreneurial support in the public school system, because, you know, like, also kids have laptops now, right? So getting them therapy and getting them an opportunity for them to talk and be able to talk to somebody in between stacking all these classes on top of them is just as important, you know. So really getting creative with how we're getting mindfulness and mental awareness to the kids and to the people. And when you hear about these creative opportunities, support them, like, you know, all you can, and support what they're doing, especially when they are of the marginalized communities, because there's not enough people on the front line who have that voice and look like us, or yeah, and that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists for all of your knowledge today. I really appreciate this. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation this week. This meant a lot for me. I hope it was helpful for you all. And we are doing other virtual events during the Well City Challenge. So you'll see more from us. So be on the lookout for that. But follow us along. More information at theeconomyleague.org/Well City. Bye, Dad.